Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jenless, the podcast that's here to help you free yourself from the crap that's holding you back so you can claim the life you're meant to live. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we're going to talk about healing your relationship with your ego. Let's dive in. Hi, friends, it's Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. And first, I wanted to do a little check-in with you. How's it going? How are you feeling? We are now into April through the first quarter of the year. How is your year going for you? How's 2023 going? How are you feeling? Did you choose a word of the year? If you chose a word of the year, how's it going with that word of the year? Is it time to choose a new word of the year? How's it going? Mine has been ready, and it has been such a great word to guide me through lots of things. I mean, big things and small things. One of the small things is that I have been making my bed as soon as I get out of bed every morning. I am ready. I am out of bed, and I have made that bed. And it's such a tiny thing, but it is making a big difference for me. There's like this completion to getting out of bed. And I used to really put off making my bed. Like I would eventually get around to doing it, but I wouldn't do it right away. And it has really set the course for my day. So I was just curious for you, how are things going? Just a quick little check-in for yourself to ask, are all of the things that I have wanted to be possible for myself in this first quarter of the year, am I on track for those? What could I do differently? How could I shift? Today's podcast could be a beautiful check-in for you and yourself and where you're at as well. And I wanted to pose that beautiful question to you. One of the things, very exciting, I just graduated with my trauma-informed breathwork facilitator certification on Friday. That has been a 6-month journey. And I'm so excited to be on the other side of it. Put in so many hours, so many hours to breath work, to this training, to the education of it, to the facilitation hours, so much. And I'm a different person. I'm coming out of it a different person. And anytime that you've entered some kind of learning container, you know how that is. It's like, wow, I'm a whole new human being on the other side of this. And it's so cool. It's so cool. So get ready for everything that I'm going to be able to offer now with the certification that I have. One of those things is including deep breathwork journeys into my coaching program that I offer. So I am offering the next wave of Made for More, my coaching 12-week coaching program that is going to be happening starting in mid-May. If you're interested in that, if you are ready to really take on what is next for you, what you want to usher into your life, that sparkly magic that you want to step into, whatever that thing is that you are wanting to bring in, to call into your life, this program is going to help you. It's going to walk you through step by step how to do that. So I encourage you, if you're interested at all whatsoever, you can have a free one-on-one call with me, 30-minute call, and I'll make it worth your while. You will get something out of it. And, we can explore together. I don't know whether my coaching program is right for you, and you might not either, but we can have this free call where we can discuss whether it's the right next step for you. So you can go to jenless.com/madeformore, where you can go and check that out and see if that might be the next step to keep you on track with what you're wanting to usher in here in 2023. What is that next big thing that is on the horizon for you? You are made for more. And I just cannot wait to see what transpires for you in the rest of 2023. There's so much time. There is so much time this year to make so many amazing shifts possible for you. All right, friends, today on the podcast, we have the amazing Kela Rose. She is hailing from Hawaii, beautiful Hawaii. She is a beautiful human being who is here to share with us about becoming a soul in progress. So Kela has a podcast called Skinny Dipping, and it's about healing through science and spirituality, understanding ourselves at our deepest level. She really strips down and dives in to conversations, specifically conversations that'll change our lives. And I really think this conversation that she and I have about the ego, about loving yourself, about learning to trust yourself can be one of those real talk conversations that really makes you think, that could really transform something for you and this part of yourself that we tend to push aside, that we tend to put down, that we try to pretend is not there, or when it is there, we're mad at it. Like, let's heal our relationship with our ego. Everyone, introducing the beautiful Kela Rose. Hi, Kela.
Hi, beautiful. I am so excited to be here and that we're finally doing this. Thank you so much for allowing us to be in our ebbs and flows of life. And, whenever things get put off for a moment, I'm just like, we're here at the divine time. Like, there's a reason that this conversation needed to happen today. And I feel so ready for it. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful place to even kick off this conversation, because that's been on my heart and mind this week, is trusting the timing, divine timing. And people would say that to me years ago, and I'd be like, what the F are you talking about? Like, trust the timing. That makes zero sense to me. Like, tell me how, tell me when, tell me why, tell me all the things. And it's one of those things where you don't realize how important it is to trust it until you've trusted it. And then all of a sudden it's like,
And that's the thing. It's like, it must be like a collective download, because some of my friends were having a similar experience to you and me, where we're both thinking about divine timing. And I noticed that multiple people, I'll see videos on TikTok or Instagram, and fellow creator friends will be saying the same thing that I've been thinking, or collectively like journaling about. And I feel like that theme is coming up for divine timing. Because for me personally, I'm kind of in a little bit of a hermit mode era. I live in Maui, Hawaii, and this is my home. I'm born and raised here, but all my friends have like moved away, and I really only have like my boyfriend and like 3 really good friends here, but they all work like all the time. And I was just having this moment of like, when is it going to be my turn? Like, when is it going to be my turn to like have a friend group again and like feel that connection and like have people who want to like adventure and have fun? Like, I was having this moment of like, woe is me. And last week I like did some card pulling and some journaling to see like what was going on. Like, why do I feel so alone? And honestly, I just pulled this card and it was like, it is coming. Like, the divine timing is coming, and you need to be in this position now. You don't know until you know. And sometimes information is withheld from us because it would be too overwhelming to know. And when we are meant to know, the information will be revealed to us. And I think about that in divine timing, where it's like, okay, when that cycle or that era or that opportunity, to be really social and in my extroverted era, when that is the divine time, it will come at the perfect moment. And right now I'm supposed to be doing the inner work, the inner healing to prepare for what's next. And I just got this big download being like, wait at the divine traffic lights, like literally hold up, because your green light is coming. But before the green light, you need to do the preparation. You need to slow down. You need to do that inner work, that inner healing, and having that kind of hermit mode, introverted moment for ourselves before we're able to step out into the world and truly embody who we are. So I don't know. I've been having that divine timing moment for sure, coming up a lot in many themes in my life.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing on that. And you personally are so good at listening to your inner wisdom. So it seems, and you have a podcast, you talk a lot about these things. I will say, over the past couple of months, we've been talking a lot in this podcast about what I'm calling untethered practices, like card pulling, like journaling, like meditation, just all of these different things, spiritual practices, energetic practices, Reiki, all of these things that people use, and you lean into those. So I guess I have a question, like, what are your practices that you do that help you to listen to that inner wisdom?
Totally. That is such a good question. And I love that you call it your untethered practices for your podcast, because I think that's brilliant, first of all. And I think for me, I've had an interesting relationship with the tools. And I would just like to say, yeah, these practices that we are talking about, like meditation, breath work, card pulling. I go to somatic healing and Reiki. I love cold plunges and saunas. I feel like that even connects me to myself. What else? Sound healing is what I'm really into right now.
Mm.
A couple months ago, maybe like 2 months ago, I said to my friend, I was like, sound bowls are really freaking expensive. So I'm going to bring some in for free. I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to get a gifted collaboration or I don't know what, but I was like, I'm manifesting some sound bowls, kind of throwing it out into the universe in like a joking way. And then literally like 3 weeks ago, my neighbor was moving and my dad was like, oh, like, guess what our neighbor has for you? Like, I think you're really going to like it. And it's like this whole like ancient Tibet like sound bowl set. So I've been really into that because I felt that calling and then they were given to me. And I was like, okay, that's affirmation that sound healing is going to be a part of my journey and a part of this year for me. And I've had an interesting relationship and I'll go back, like, my ADHD brain. I'll go back to what I was saying because truly I got caught up in the practices and the tools for a long time. And I feel like we have a tendency to displace our power in knowing ourselves through tarot, through oracle, through psychic mediums, through Reiki, through all these different modalities and tools within healing. And then I had this moment last year where I realized I was completely displacing my power. And in reality, you don't need any of that. Those are all tools. They're amazing. I love it. I'm an Oracle tarot girly. Like when I need answers, I am pulling the cards. When my friends call me, I'm like, let's pull the cards. Let's talk to spirit. Let's see what's going on here. But what I've realized is the greatest inner wisdom comes from truly solitude, sitting with yourself, listening to yourself, journaling just with yourself and seeing what flows out of your subconscious. Because when you tap into your subconscious and you tap into your imagination, that's when you tap into something actually greater than yourself. So yeah, my go-tos are like oracle cards. I used to be obsessed with the pendulum, but I'm not really into the pendulum anymore. Sound healing, meditation, breath work, movement for my body, but nothing will compare to just spending time by myself. And nothing will compare to just sitting in silence and solitude and being with myself and listening to myself. And that is the greatest untethered practice that I could recommend for anyone, is to stop displacing your power into all these tools and all these like modalities that you can explore. They're so fun. Appreciate them, have gratitude for them, explore, be creative with it, but don't think that it's like something that will replace the listening to your inner wisdom, because like that is where your messages lie for yourself, for sure. I don't know if you've experienced that, where you've kind of looked outside of yourself and then you're like, oh shit, it's actually within me.
Oh, yeah. I spent most of my life outside of myself. And so this untethering has been all about me letting go of all of the outside things and coming home to myself. And I freaking love everything that you just said there, because it's not the tool that is the thing. It's the tool is helping you to connect with yourself. And I'm a breath worker. I teach breath work. I facilitate breath work. And what I believe breath work is most powerful at, I think sometimes people will do a little bit of spiritual bypassing with breath work and with a lot of other tools too. But really the power of breath work is that moment when you meet yourself, because you've let go of all of the other stuff. You've allowed yourself this space to truly, truly meet yourself, come home to yourself and be in that just beautiful silence that you're describing, that like really hermiting in there with yourself and opening up to listen to what is there for you.
Oh, I just got so many chills when you said like breath work is about the moment that you meet yourself, because I've been diving into my breath work journey. And I think for a while I was like more addicted to the feeling and the dopamine, which I will say, like, as somebody who has grown up in a generation that's addicted to social media, like I feel like the breath work has been a good little like almost replacement sometimes for me, because I get that dopamine hit like in breath holds. Like, I don't know if you can describe this feeling better than me as a practitioner, but I feel like when I'm in a breath hold and I'm in that relaxation and I just like settle into myself and just really like tune tune in, but also by tuning in, I feel like you tune into what's around you as well as what's in you. Like listening to, for me, like the birds and the trees and everything like flowing. But that moment where I just feel this like rush of like energy through my body. And I feel like I can get kind of addicted within these practices of meditation and breath work and yoga and just different kind of like somatic healings. I can get addicted to like the dopamine hit, which is like always what our brains are searching for, is that little like dopamine hit. And I have to come back and pull myself back in and remind myself like, what is the purpose of it? And it really is to connect back to myself and meet myself deeper. And I feel like I really needed to hear that today, because I can get caught up in like the result of all the healing practices and the feeling and, you know, what it gives me, rather than just doing it to show up and doing it to meet myself and do it to really tap into who I am. I do both, but I feel like I want to lean more into the real spiritual side of it this year, and just being like, okay, like I'm showing up for no result except to just like meet myself deeper. So I really needed to hear that. So thank you for sharing that.
You're so welcome. At the same time, it's okay. There's no shame in getting the dopamine hit off of it too. So even when I say the spiritual bypass, I kind of say it with like a yes, and it's totally okay when that's what we need in that moment to feel good. It's okay to allow ourselves to in breathwork. Generally, I think it's so funny that this podcast is called Untethered, because generally you don't want to be untethered. Like you want to really stay grounded and stay in your body and not go so far out there. But sometimes it's okay, because sometimes it's like, you know what, I just need to escape for a minute. So I think it's this awareness of, you know what, I'm going to consciously do this and it's okay. And then other times knowing when you're just like getting around what really needs to happen, which is to connect with yourself.
Oh, I love that, because it's like we can't shame ourselves into the change that we want to create. Like I've always said this, like you can always only love yourself through the evolution and through the transformation. Like if you don't show up for yourself in a spiritual practice, or you're not doing all the things that you need to be doing. Like the other day on Monday, I've been having a challenge. It's called the Abundant AF April Challenge. And basically it's just to do one thing for your spiritual health, your mental health, your physical health, your financial health, and your purpose health every single day. But this doesn't look like big things. This can look like small little acts. And I'd totally fallen off. And I was like, okay, Monday, I'm going to like get back to it, get back to the challenge. Like I'm the leader in this challenge. Like I need to pull it together. And then my boyfriend was like, or we were just like in the hot tub the night before on Sunday night. And I was like, should we just like ditch all our responsibilities tomorrow and go to Hana? And Hana is like a 2.5 hour drive away, but it's like the most magical like place on earth, where it's like almost like Jurassic Park, just like so overgrown with plants, and like the most spiritual place on earth. It's truly just magic. It has so much, as we call in Hawaii, like mana, like the power, the mana of the land. That is all in Hana. Like it's just amazing. And I was like, should we just ditch all our responsibilities?
Did you?
And he was like, yes. And I didn't think he would say yes, because usually he's like, he has horses to take care of. Like he just has like more responsibility with his family, where like I just have responsibility for my personal work. And he was like, yes. And I was like kind of shocked. I was like, oh, I didn't expect you to say yes. But then I was like, let's do it. Like if it's nice weather in the morning, that's our affirmation. Let's go. And then we got up and it was beautiful. It was like the most beautiful day. And we're like, we can't do our work today. We're like, we need to escape to Hana. And I didn't.
Your work is to go to Hana.
My work is to go into the nature and show up in that way. And it's like so funny, because it met some of the criteria of my challenge just naturally throughout the day, but it wasn't like I was trying to meet it. I wasn't like, I'm doing the physical exercise or I'm doing things for my mental health. I'm like, or my spiritual health. I'm like, no, I'm showing up, I'm hiking, I'm being in the ocean. That's mental health. I'm connecting to nature. That's spiritual health. And I'm connecting to my partner and somebody that I love. And that's purpose health. I was just like, notice that I didn't have to like check off all the things in such an intense way. And if I didn't show up in the exact way that I thought I was supposed to, I don't need to shame myself for that. I can be like, oh, actually, I kind of hit, all the different stops in these little ways. And that is magical. That is like so special. And that is a day well spent. So I don't know why I got into that, but I feel like we can shame ourselves for not showing up in the way that we think we need to, like green juice, Pilates class, meditation at 6 a.m. Not for me. I show up in a very like intuitive way when it comes to my practices. Like I don't like shame myself into healing because that just isn't going to work. And I've done that before. And it just completely went against everything that I was trying to embody.
Yeah, that was the perfect thing to go into, because I think it's really important about not shaming ourselves into healing, not shaming ourselves during the healing process. It's just, we are all on our journey. Going back to the very beginning of this conversation and talking about the divine timing, everything is happening for us in divine timing, showing up in the way that is really serving you. You know, maybe you were meant to skip those couple of days so that you had this full day of just really enjoying and going out and having that experience. Like everything is just always showing up for us in the best way possible. And the more we can accept that, the better. And really, one of the things that you just brought up that I really wanted to have you on the podcast to come talk about is that self-love. And really, what does it mean to really show up for ourselves, to really love ourselves? Because I myself have been on this journey in the past year. I've just had so many experiences and talked to so many people on this podcast and met people in my life that it's been leading me more and more back home to myself, as we talked about, and really learning what it means to love myself. So what say you on that topic?
I love that topic. And, I always bring it back to this example of, imagine yourself as like in third person, as if you were a friend to yourself. So you have a friend, right? You have a friend that you have a relationship with. And, they say that they're going to show up at a certain time. They say that they're going to send that text out to somebody to help you out with something, whatever it is. They say they're going to do things for you. And every single time that they show up and that they keep their word to you, and, they don't need to like completely like, what's the word? Oh, stretch themselves like super thin to like show up for you. But like they're showing up for you in the best way that they know how. Every single time that they show up for you, you build rapport with them. You build trust in them. And with that rapport and that trust comes this love that begins to grow, because you believe that you can trust this person. You can rely on this person. You have a great relationship and a great rapport with this other person. And then, imagine they don't show up, they ditch you, they're flaky. Like as they begin to not show up for you, you're like, that's not really a good friend. Like I'm starting, like I might care for them, but maybe I don't really love them anymore because like they're not showing up for me and I deserve better. And there's this inner part of ourselves that knows what we deserve. And I like to take that like view and an example with somebody else and switch it back and flip it back and point it back to me. And take all the fingers that I'm pointing at everybody else and the people in my life and point it back to me and be like, okay, but how does that represent the relationship with myself? Every single time that I keep my word to myself, that I show up for myself, that I, have intuitive discipline for myself, an intuitive commitment, because, some days what you need isn't to follow all the things you have to do in your list. Sometimes what you need is, to really just like go and spend time with yourself and like have that like rest period. It's about listening to yourself intuitively and asking yourself, what do I need? And showing up in that way and committing to yourself in what you need intuitively. And with that, you begin to fall in love with yourself because you build trust with yourself. You build rapport with yourself. You know that you can count on yourself. And that sense of radical responsibility, knowing that you have your own fucking back, is what builds that deep inner self-love. And I think that, people think it's like skincare and, like I said, green juices and Pilates. And it's like, those things are great tools. Like I love a good Pilates class. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I'm a bar girl. I'm a bar girly. Like I love Pilates, but it doesn't make up for if you're not showing up for yourself in the way that you need. And when you show up for yourself in the way that you need, the way that your current self needs, the way that your inner child self needs, what happens is you begin to fall deeply in love with yourself. And like you, I wasn't showing up for myself for the longest time. I mean, I like up until 3-4 years ago, I started therapy. But before then, I really like avoided myself. Like I threw all my energy into my work, into school, into extracurricular activities, into this idea of outward success that I thought would make me love myself and make me feel that validation that I wanted from myself. I was trying to get it from everybody around me. And I know so many people can relate to this, and you're nodding your
These
head.
podcast listeners are overachievers.
Yes. And yes, I am an overachiever to the max. And like, now I just like operate in such a different way. And I don't think I could ever go back. Even though like healing isn't linear, I just know that I could actually never go back to that place where I work my ass off that hard and I ignore my needs, because it's just impossible, because I've seen how amazing it is to listen to myself. And even though it's been such a journey to work through finding validation in different ways and finding that inner validation rather than from the outward sources, I noticed that success shows up better in my life actually when I show up better for myself. So I've just seen this like circular, like karmic cycle of like, okay, actually what I thought was working wasn't working for me. And this new norm is what fits my life in such a better way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it totally does. I love that idea of success shows up better for you when you show up for yourself. It sums up why self-love. I've had this real issue with this phrase self-love. It just feels like very big. It's just, and so I just have struggled with it. But I feel like an example like that, when you show up for you, it starts to show up in other ways in your life, and really allowing yourself to experience that and understand that. Your example of a friend, like what kind of friend are you being to yourself? Exactly. And when you are a better friend to yourself, you're actually the better friend that you could be to other people too, because you truly understand it. Otherwise, we're just so often pleasing and just trying so hard to make things. The trying really starts to go away when you actually start loving yourself. You don't have to try anymore.
I know when you're like pouring from that full cup, it's like effortless. It's like you want to give to others. And that's something that I've just come into knowing in this last year. I feel like the beginning of my spiritual, mental health, self-love journey, the intersectionality of it, I feel like the beginning of it was very like self-serving, like what can this do for me? And over time, as I dive deeper into knowing myself deeper, I know that all of us at our core, we have this deep need for fulfillment through service and through helping others. And I've always had that. But I think in the beginning of my journey, I was very focused on what this could all this whole journey could do for myself and my life and my success and my career. And now I'm like, oh, now what can it do for others? Like, what can it do for others? And like, that is so fulfilling. Like service and like showing up for people and helping others is so fulfilling. Like it literally feels so good. And it just helps you when you help yourself, you can help others. And when you help others, you help yourself. It's just like that beautiful like circle. We're just getting that good karma back to us.
Yeah. It's really kind of ironic though, because it's like we often go into the journey trying to help ourselves, like, oh, what can this do for me? There's this, which it really turns out it's the ego, and it's like, what's this going to do for me? And then what we find out is that we actually really, truly need to do for ourselves. And then we get to show up for others. But it's not until we get that like service mindset that it finally, I don't know, it's a whole mind fuck, to be totally honest with you, but we're all on the journey.
Yeah, I'm getting there. And like, so interesting that you brought up the ego, because I feel like, people just like want to like be like, fuck the ego. Like, I don't like the ego, but I like to work with my ego. Like, I'm like, my ego is there. And if I am like this divine being who's inherently worthy and like something bigger than myself created me, and I have this ego, like the ego is there for a reason. Like we can work with the ego. We can befriend our ego. And that's why it's good to, go into the journey in a self-serving way, because when you begin to reap the rewards of the journey, like I've just noticed that when I clear out internal blockages, my outer world reflects that. I see it in my business. I see it in my bank account. I see it in my relationships. I see all these places in my life expanding and getting better when I clear out the inner blockages and the limiting beliefs that were keeping me from the life that I so want. And, even though that is so ego-based, it's like our brain, our ego needs evidence to to do anything, to want to do anything, to show up in any sort of type of way, it needs evidence. It needs proof that this shit works and that it's going to help you in some self-serving way, or else the ego doesn't want to show up. So I think it is good to go into it and see and feel how good it feels to allow the world to open up for you in the way it does after you begin healing these inner parts of yourself. You see the results. You see your business taking off. You see opportunities flowing your way. You see love coming into your life. And you're like, wow, this is a direct correlation to the inner work that I'm doing, this inner healing, this feeling to heal moment that I'm going through. And that proves to the ego, because it proves to the ego. It just wants to be proven. It wants predictability. It wants familiarity, because for the ego, familiarity and predictability equals safe. And that's its main just purpose, is to keep us safe. And that's why we have this ego. And, we would be freaking crazy in danger if we didn't have our ego. We wouldn't understand like the boundaries of the human experience if we didn't have the ego. So I like to work with my ego and be like, okay, I'm going to give you the proof that you need and the familiarity that you need so that I can continue to grow and continue to evolve. And I don't have all this resistance from the ego not wanting to change, because I'm like, look, this change is good for us and other people. Like, we are doing better, babe. Like, I befriend my ego.
This is such a fascinating concept, because there are so many of us, and naturally when it's like, okay, we don't want to see that it's our ego, but then when we do see that it's our ego, we just reject it and we're like, oh, my ego is terrible, much like what you're saying. So if somebody is kind of in that state and they're like, oh, I'm interested in what she's saying about befriending it, how do you befriend it? Like, what is like one thing that you could do?
Totally. Something my therapist says that I've definitely taken in and really internalized is when we're working with the ego, whatever part is coming up, because usually the ego, there's this deep unfulfillment, or there's this fear, or there's this comparison or judgment. Those are signs that you're working with your ego. And I would say the first thing to do is kind of recognize the signs of when your ego is speaking versus your higher self. And usually throughout the day, you will have your ego talking to you way more than your higher self because of the world that we exist in. And if you're feeling like you need to protect, or if you're feeling like you need to judge, or if you're feeling like you need to deflect, or if you're feeling those intrusive thoughts of I'm not good enough, that person's not good enough, all these intrusive thoughts coming in, it's your ego. So I feel like the first thing to do is understand when the ego shows up and what it looks like. And then the second thing that I would recommend is when you are encountering these parts of yourself that you might not like, it's okay to be like, I don't like those parts of myself. They don't show up for myself in the best way. I always remind myself, and my therapist always reminds me this when we're working with these parts, that we're not getting rid of this part of yourself. We're not getting rid of this protection mechanism, because that was meant to serve you in this positive way. And so the second thing that I ask you is, what is the positive intention of your ego showing up like that? Of judging, of deflecting, of self-hating or hating others, whatever is coming up to protect you, what is the positive intention? So 1, recognize when the ego comes up, know the signs. 2, what is the positive intention of your ego showing up in that way? And then number 3, I want you to ask yourself, what can we add to this moment so that the ego can relax a little bit? We're not taking it away. We're not taking away the ego. We're not taking away the protection. That is there for a reason. If you do that, then you will see this resistance and you will see this retaliation of the ego, and it's going to get a lot worse. So my therapist always reminds me, we're not taking it away. We're not getting rid of it, but we're adding healthier things to it so that it does not limit you any longer. And that is just like the hugest realization. It almost feels like just a deep sigh when you realize, okay, I'm not going to get rid of these parts of myself, but I'm going to add healthier things to them. It's almost like, when people are asking me, like, how do you eat healthy? Like, how do you do that? I don't think about taking away foods from my plate. I think about adding greens to my plate. And it's like the same thing with your ego. You're not taking away these parts because they're there for a positive intention. They are meant to protect you. But how can we add healthier things to them so that you feel safer and you feel more loved, you feel more fulfilled, so that the ego doesn't have to be so active?
It's so beautiful. That's so beautiful what you say there about what can I add to. We could use that mindset for so many things. Like even like you said with food, there was somebody who was on the podcast last year, Itzel, and she's so beautiful. And she is a chef. And one of the things that she suggested is creating a rainbow on your plate. And she's like, just what is the color on your plate and how can you add to it? And I just wonder if that concept, I'm thinking that could just apply to these parts of yourself. Like, where can I add some color? What can I add to this that could be really supportive?
I love that. Yeah, I think that's so accurate. Like looking at the places of your life and you're like, how can I add more compassion? How can I add more creativity? How can I add more empathy and understanding and education around myself? And when you add these healthier things to it, you notice that the ego just naturally relaxes and you don't have to fight the ego. When people are like ego death and like whatever with psychedelics, like I believe you have an ego death, but like the ego is probably going to come back. Like it's going to come back because we're humans and it is in our evolutionary brain to have this ego. So I'm not trying to fight with her. I'm not trying to make her wrong. I'm not trying to push her away. I want to befriend her and give her the compassion, love, attention, validation, whatever the ego is needing. I want to give it to her in a healthier way so that I can begin to move through my life in a less limited way.
It's really a cool perspective and a really pragmatic perspective as well. And I appreciate that about you. When I've listened to your podcast, you're just so authentic and you're like, this is the fucking real truth. Like, let's just talk about this for real.
I hate like the theoretical, like, I'm just like, okay, like literally these are journal prompts that anyone listening right now can do. Like you see the ego come up, you recognize it, you ask yourself, well, like, what is the positive intention? You journal about it. You write a whole page. You let your subconscious mind up onto the page. And then you say, what healthier things can I add to it? And what do I need right now? What is my ego missing? And that might look like I said before, love, attention, validation, safety, whatever it is for you. These are things that you can actionably journal about. And I think that to reflect on this is so, so important because you can listen to the podcast, but can you do the work? Like, can you actually show up? Can you take the actionable steps that you need? And, the actionable steps might look so small, but the impact of them are so big. And with my podcast in particular, I'm just like, okay, I don't want to talk about just like the theory of everything. Like I want to get to like, what are the actionable steps that we can use to apply this to our life? And how can we break it down in a way that is like chewable vitamins? Like how can we make it so that everyone can like take them and chew them and enjoy them,
Yeah, we're going to take our Flintstones today. So, okay, if somebody's listening, they're like, I'm going to chew my Flintstone vitamins today. How could somebody who's like, this, even maybe the ego sounds theoretical to them. How does the ego show up in our lives? What might be a situation that somebody might be experiencing that they could apply this process to?
Yeah. Okay. Let me think of a recent experience because my ego is coming up all the time. She's like always, she's like really out there.
She's like hello.
Yeah, for real. Okay. This is kind of an intense example, but it's something that's prominent in my life. I just moved back in with my family. So it's been an experience. I was living with my boyfriend, but then I was like, I want to travel. So I am going to move back home for just like a couple months so that I can spend my money traveling and not on rent. So of course, as anyone knows who's moved back in with their family at any point, that is an experience as an adult. So me and my mom, we haven't really fought since I was like probably in high school. And we got into our first fight since high school last week. And for example, it all started because I was rushing and I had a lot going on and she came to me and needed something from me and I did not have time for her. So I kind of like snapped off at her. I kind of was short with her, a little snappy, a little bit sarcastic. And I was just like, I just don't have time for this. I can see in that moment, like my ego is trying to like keep me on track. Like it's trying to like get my shit done and it's trying to like protect me from the consequences if I don't get my shit done. And then fast forwarding to a couple hours later, we get into another conflict again about the same incident. And she says something that just hits me below the belt. She's just like, you're just upset about this person. And that's why you're mad. And it has nothing to do with me. Calls me out on projecting, which I might have been projecting a little bit, like my ego's coming up and being defensive a little bit. But when she said that to me, it like hit me so hard. And I was like, ouch, why would you say something to me that hurts so badly? That's so sensitive. And, in that moment, I could have taken my higher self out and I could have been like, take the hurt, take the pain, walk away. she's projecting onto me in this moment. But instead, my ego turns around, and my Scorpio rising, for anyone that knows astrology, I'm Scorpio rising, intensity turns back around and just says something to her like, well, this is why none of your kids like you, or something like that. Like, says something that just like hurt so badly. Like, I turned it around and she stabbed me here. And then she turned around and I stabbed her in the back, metaphorically, of course. And I felt so bad afterwards, obviously. But like in that moment, my soul self was not there at all. It was only the ego. And she was saying, protect, protect, protect. This person hurt you. So I'm going to turn around and I'm going to deflect. And when we see ourselves deflecting onto other people or judging other people or making other people wrong and thinking it's everyone else is the problem and not me, that's your ego. That is your ego coming up. And instead, when I took a second, a couple days later, just like reflecting on that situation, I was like, I didn't mean that. I was trying to hurt somebody, and it was a protection mechanism, because when you feel hurt, you want to hurt. When hurt people, like that's like the cliche classic quote, but it's cliche because it's true. Because when we are hurt, our ego comes out to protect, and that looks like the warrior. That looks like the actionable warrior. And, that's kind of for people that embody that warrior energy. I would also like to say our ego can show up in shutting down. And I notice that people kind of go to one of two ways, depending on their childhood, depending on like their past traumas and the way that they were raised. You either have somebody like me who can completely just like turn around and explode and shoot it back at somebody and deflect and protect. And I go into that warrior mode. And I would say like 50% of people are like that I've talked to. And then I think that there's this other category of people who are more like the internal ego people. And what happens is, for people who like don't deflect and who don't explode, you will see that your ego actually shows up internally. You'll see yourself beating yourself up emotionally. You'll see yourself judging yourself, thinking everything that you do is not good and you're never going to achieve everything. When you hear those always and nevers and that kind of verbiage, you know that the ego is very, very active. That's like one sign that I would definitely say when you say, I always do this, or I never do this, or I'm never going to succeed in this, or whatever it is, you know that is the ego. So we have the exploders, and then we have kind of the internalizers. And the internalizers, my boyfriend is an internalizer. And, if somebody were to say something really mean to him, he wouldn't snap back necessarily. He would shut down. And people that shut down, what happens is they have this intrusive nature where the negative self-talk spiral comes up. And when you see yourself in that negative self-talk spiral, that is the ego. 100%.
Yeah. Because to go back to your example earlier, imagine if you were saying those things to your mom. I mean, it's the same thing. It's instead you're saying them to yourself instead of actually saying them to another person, which is
exactly
equally as harsh.
Both are harsh. And like what I've realized is like when I hurt somebody else, I'm actually just hurting me. And also when I'm hurting me, I'm also hurting people that I love around me. And I think it is so interconnected in that way. And those are just like little ways to know that the ego shows up. And I even will like talk to myself. I'll even be like, damn, ego, I'll be like, you're really overactive right now. Like you're really like, you're here. And even just naming it, like when you claim it and when you name it and when you own it. I talk about this in the podcast, owning your shit like all the time. Like that's like my go-to saying. When you own your shit, when you own the things that, are your ego, like even the intrusive thoughts coming in, I'll go to my boyfriend. I'll be like, I'm having this really intrusive thought. And I think that this project that I'm doing is just like gonna absolutely flop. Like, like I'm just having all these intrusive thoughts, the negative self-talk spiral. You'll also notice that the ego is really active whenever you are obsessively and compulsively thinking about something else. The inner self doesn't really show up in that obsessive way, but the ego will show up in a very like obsessive, I can't stop thinking about it way. And that's why when you say it out loud, you share it with somebody that you trust, you own it, you even write it down. When you own it, it no longer owns you. So I think that's a very like easy thing to do is when you feel either like you're going to explode or you're going to implode, whatever it is for you, whichever kind of version of yourself you are. And also you can be both, like you can experience both. I definitely experience both as well. And we all have our common nature, but it's like, which one do you lean to more often? You can literally just call yourself out, like say it out loud, name it and say it and identify it. And it kind of like takes the power away from that thing just a little bit.
Yeah, because often this goes back to your step 3 of add something to it. Often what the ego really wants is just for you to see it and hear it. And sometimes maybe it does want a little bit of love, a little bit of compassion or care. Often it's just like, hey, do you see me? Do you see me? Yeah. I'm real irritated about this. Or like, I'm just warning you that something's happening over here, because it's protecting, as you mentioned, it's keeping you safe. And so it just wants you to see it. And if it's like, if you feel ignored, you're just going to keep getting louder. And so it's just getting louder. So naming it, to your point, is what an effective strategy for helping it to stand down, because that's all it wants.
Literally, it just wants attention. Like most of our egos really want attention. Like they just like really want to be seen and heard, like, and that type of attention and some sort of validation or acknowledgement. I totally agree. It's sometimes not even about giving it the love. I think that's like the next step. But the first thing is like, just give it some attention, because I know that once I kind of give my ego some attention, she like will quiet down a little bit. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're good. We're safe this time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal example, because I think everybody can relate to that moment in some way, shape, or form, whether they have externalized it, whether they've internalized it. We've all probably done a little bit of both in our lifetime. So that example is really supportive. We had not intended to talk about the ego in this conversation, but I'm so glad that it went to it. And because you are the perfect person to share everything that you shared about it in the way that you have. You just did such a great job of introducing what it is, what to do about it, all of those things. I love how you have so much compassion for the ego itself, because that's what I have learned for me is it goes back to that idea again of meeting myself, because the ego is part of that. There's all these different parts of you. There's your heart, your mind, your spirit, all of these pieces of you, all of them just want to be seen and heard and loved by you.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's like the best feeling to love all parts of yourself. And, you know, if loving seems far off for anybody listening, like try with acceptance first. And I think that's a great place to begin, is just beginning to accept all parts of yourself and knowing that who you are or who you may have been does not define who you will become. And I think that's really important, is you can acknowledge these parts of yourself, but don't hate those parts of yourself, because if you really want to change and evolve, you need to first acknowledge them and see them for who they are, and then working to make different choices and different decisions in the future. And that's how we really like change and evolve and become the person we want to be. And, you know, I definitely had a tendency when I was young. That's why this fight was so crazy, because like we haven't gotten a fight in so long. And I definitely have been an exploder, like in my life and my relationships. Like, I don't know if you know anything about astrology, but I'm like Aries, Scorpio, Gemini. Like I got all the craziness of my chart. And at the end of the day, like when I feel like unsafe or unheard, then I have a tendency to lash out. In the last 4 years since going to therapy, that's kind of why I started going to therapy, was because I was just kind of being like verbally abusive, for lack of a better word, to my partner, just like being really mean, like calling him names and like just like being mean. And I was like, I don't want to be that person. That's not who I am. Actually, at my core, that's how I react when I feel unsafe. And now it's like probably down 80%. And I feel like if it was like 100% before, now I feel like it's down 80%. And it's just like healing isn't linear. And like in very rare situations, that reaction still comes up, but I'm still just like so grateful for the person I've evolved into, because I'm really proud of who I am now. And I really love myself because of that, because I've done the inner work and I'm willing to own the parts of myself that not a lot of people are. Like, not a lot of people could like sit on this mic and be like, in my past, I've done XYZ and I say this to the people I love. And like, but in reality, people are doing it all the time behind closed doors. And it's just like, if you want to change, like you have to be willing to own your shit. And also know that you don't have to like those old parts of you, but you can like accept them and know that acknowledging them and moving through them is the best thing that you can do to evolve into the person that you truly want to be.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. You just did a podcast episode pretty recently on vulnerability, and you're just such a beautiful display of that and sharing exactly what you've been going through. It's such a gift. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important that we realize that you said, I'm probably paraphrasing, but who you are and who you've been is not who does not have to define who you're becoming. So important that we accept that more and more in our society. And that's part of, we could go off on a tangent about, cancel culture and some of the things around that, but it has just created this place where we feel like we can't change, we can't evolve in so many ways. And I think just social media in general, like it can be hard. So having somebody like you, an example of simply just owning your shit, as you say, and going out there and talking about it so openly is really powerful for people. So thank you so much for sharing as you have.
Thank you. No, honestly, I'm obsessed with this episode. I'm like, I want to share this. Like, this is so good. Like, I mean, of course I'm going to share it when it comes up, but I'm like, this is so good. I feel like we just got into the nitty gritty of things like right away, which I just love. I'm like, let's pass the small talk and let's just like get to the big info that everyone wants to actually listen to.
Well, that's my mission in this life. I'm a former hairstylist, and that I have to tell you, when I went to corporate America, so I did hair for many years, and then I was like, I got burnt out. I left and I went to the corporate world. The juxtaposition of the real talk that you get to have with your hairstylist versus going into a corporate environment and realizing that people are not real at all. It's just like, we've got to invite more real conversations like this into the world where we just talk straight up about these things. So you're a gift, a huge gift. I have one last question for you that I like to ask every single podcast guest, because it's so important to me that we all see the magic in the world. Where do you personally see the magic out there in the world?
I love that. I have a tattoo that says made of magic, and it was actually my first tattoo that I got. So like, I have like my skinny dipping tattoo of a girl diving into the universe, a moon of the nature. But this was my first tattoo, it says made of magic. So I love that question. I mean, kind of just going back to what we were saying before, like I find magic in vulnerability. Like when people are their authentic selves, when they're willing to show up unapologetically and show themselves to the world, I feel like that is so beautiful and that is so magical. I also think us having these conversations about, things beyond ourselves and things within ourselves, that is one of the most magical things that we could do, because curiosity is where change and evolution is born. So I'm literally so grateful for this conversation. I feel like this conversation is magic. The way that you've led me in this conversation is truly magic. Like, you are an amazing host. You were telling me I'm an amazing host. You are an amazing host. Like the questions you asked and like the space that you hold, and it makes sense you're a hairstylist, because I'm like, I feel that. Like I feel like I'm like at the station right now getting my hair done and we're just chit-chatting about life. And I think, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and to also make time for yourself is so magical. So I don't know, the whole world is magical. I love it all. Like,
well, honestly, you're made of magic. The world's made of magic. Beautiful, beautiful. Yes. Beautiful answers. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you, find your podcast? How can they connect with you? Yeah. What's out there?
Thank you so much. So I am the podcast host. I'm Kela Rose, guys. I'm the podcast host of Skinny Dipping, the podcast where we talk about the mind, the body, and the soul in order to create actionable change in our lives. Like we kind of did today. I give you kind of like actual journal prompts, step-by-step guides, things like that. I really like to dive into that. And then my socials are Skinny Dipping Diaries for the Instagram, for the pod, Skinny Dipping for the podcast on all streaming platforms. And then Sundazed KK is my personal handle. You can find me on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, and I post all the healing things, as well as just like, I don't know, living my best life, adventures, all that good stuff. So it's Sundazed KK. So it's like Sundazed when you're in the sun too long, but you're like cute, really happy, but like really tired, but like super peaceful. That is Sundazed KK, because I'm Kela Rose. And that's where you can find me. Also, I have a community. So you'll see on all my platforms, you can check out on whatever link is attached, like in the description below, you can find my community. It is the Soul in Progress community. It's an app. You download it on your phone. It's through the Circle community app. And basically it's like our own app, our own website. And we do live workshops. There's like feed spaces. I post resources for like EFT tapping and meditation. And then there's group chat spaces for like the accountability challenges that we do, like the Abundant AF April, and also just like healing talks around. I don't know if anyone needs advice, they just throw something in the group chat. We chat about it. And the live workshops has also been so amazing to like connect one-on-one with the community and really see that inner work happening face to face. Cause I feel like with the podcast world, I'm like, who's listening? Like I can see the numbers on the screen, but I'm like, it's hard to feel the impact sometimes. And I think with the community, I really began to be able to feel fulfilled from feeling that impact that I'm having on individual humans that I truly vibe with and love. So that is the Soul in Progress community, Skinny Dipping the podcast, and Sundays KK. That's where you can find me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's so amazing. So many places to connect with you and enjoy your work. So all of those links are in the show notes. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh my gosh. I hope you got so much out of that conversation. So good. So good. Some of the things that Kela shared in that conversation that really stood out to me, I mean, and it's why I titled the podcast What I Did. It was that conversation that we had about the ego and how to really work with it, and not just work with it, but become friends with your ego. Why not? Why not befriend your ego? It's part of you, and it's part of you that's here to really help you and guide you on your journey. So let's be friends with it. Let's say hello to it. Let's follow her instructions to recognize the ego. Really ask it. What is the intent? What's the positive intent for you showing up here? What are you adding right now here in this moment? What is it trying to show you? And just name it. One of the things that I have learned that is so important is simply naming things. Like, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm without judgment. Simply naming it can be so healing, can be so rewarding. Give it a try. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, if you got something out of it, if you can think of someone who could benefit from it, share it with a friend. Encourage them to listen to this episode, to subscribe to this podcast, to follow along with Untethered with Jen Liss, gaining all of the wisdom that can help them to move forward on whatever that thing is that's calling to their heart, to your heart, so that you can step out and be the shiniest, most sparkliest version of your unicorn self. I'll see you next time.